Okay, welcome everyone. I hope you're having a nice day, getting ready for Shabbos. No, I'm excited for another Shabbos, although it's going to be a hot one this week, but hopefully a lovely one. We're going to do one short Rashi today. Again, not necessarily from our Aliyah, because we kind of got off course in terms of the days this week. But an interesting Rashi towards the end of the Parsha. Of course, Parsha Shlach goes from topic to topic. We've already gotten off the topic of the Meraglim already in the fourth Aliyah, into the fifth Aliyah, and the sixth Aliyah, and the seventh Aliyah, goes on to new topics, including the menachos and nisachim, the wine libations and the meal offerings that come along with korbanos, the mitzvah challah, which we discussed yesterday, and then the story of the makoshesh eitzim, which is introduced over here in these psukim. The Torah tells us in the seventh aliyah different punishments for different crimes, and then goes on to give one example of an avera that someone committed already at this point in the very early stages of the travels of the Jewish people in the Midbar. Vayu b'nei Yisrael b'midbar vayimtzu ish mekoshesh etzim b'yom HaShabbat. As they're in the desert, they find the person who's gathering wood on Shabbos, one of the prohibitions of Shabbos, one of the 39 malachos. He's violating it, and they don't know what to do. They don't know how to approach this very first circumstance in which a person violates an avera of the Torah. And now they have a mishkan, they have a whole established protocol that they have to feed into, which they've been learning about, being taught about, but now it's actually going to come to fruition. They need to know what to do and how to approach it. So they come to Moshe and to Aaron and to all of the elders, and they try to understand what's going to happen to this person, what the appropriate capital punishment is, and whether they fulfilled all the requirements of hasra, of warning, etc., etc. And also, interesting facet of this story, of course, Vayinicho Soba Mishmar, they put him in a prison of sorts. It's a very odd concept in Judaism. We look at all of Parshas Mishpatim, all of Torah, civil law, all kinds of damages and crimes, and you never see mention of the concept of a prison. The concept of imprisonment is very foreign to the Torah, but it is mentioned over here. Perhaps it doesn't mean prison, but it means kind of in waiting, in limbo, until HaKadosh Baruch Hu would tell them what to do. And of course, Hashem gives them the appropriate steps to take in terms of the capital punishment, the stoning that has to occur by the rest of the nation. Lots to say about this interesting incident of the Mekoshish Eitzim. But what I want to show you is a Rashi to comment on just the introductory phrase before we even get to the act of the Mekoshish. And it's a very sad Rashi, a heartbreaking Rashi. But I don't want to leave you on a downer, but I do want to introduce you to this concept. Vayu b'nei Yisrael b'midbar. The whole introduction to the Makoshes is that the Jewish people were in the desert. And as they were in the desert, Vayimtzu ish Makoshesh eitzim. They find this person who's collecting sticks. We know they're in the desert. Of course they're in the desert. They haven't budged from the desert. Not only that, but the Torah just told us earlier in this parsha, they're going to spend 40 years in the desert. There's no chance they're out of the desert. We know they're in the midbar. This phrase is totally irrelevant, redundant, unnecessary. Why does it have to introduce the incident of the Makoshes by saying Vayu b'nei Yisrael b'midbar, that they were in the desert? Rashi says Vayu b'nei Yisrael b'midbar vayimtzu. Why is this introductory phrase told to us over here? Because of Gnusan Shel Yisrael Diber HaKasuv. The Torah is telling us the sad story of the Jewish people. Torah is actually speaking here, even though it rarely does this. Moshe Rabbeinu is very careful. The Torah is very careful always to preserve the kavod of the Jewish people, the honor of the Jewish people, never to speak disgracefully about the behaviors of the Jewish people as a whole. But here the Torah has to mention it. The Torah speaks about Gnusan Shel Yisrael, the disgrace of the Jewish people. Shelo shamru el Shabbos rishona, uvashnia ba zeh v'chilula. The Torah is introducing us here to the fact that this means that the Jewish people only kept one Shabbos properly, and that by the very second Shabbos in the Midbar, this Makoshesh Eitzim does this act, and on behalf of the rest of the Jewish people, breaks the ability for them to keep the Shabbos. Now, there's so much to say about this Rashi. I just want to reflect on it for a moment. As I said, on the one hand, it's very depressing. Jewish people just came out of Egypt, the greatest miracles of all time. Now they received the Torah, they have a Mishkan, they have a Kadosh Baruch Hu, all the miracles in their present. They have God literally before their eyes, and they already messed up. They could only keep one Shabbos. They already messed up. So you might say the Jewish people are doomed forever. How can we ever expect to keep the Shabbos? Jewish people in the Midbar under those circumstances couldn't do it, then certainly we can't do it either. On the one hand, it's a very depressing thought. On the other hand, for us, I think so many generations later, it can be an encouraging thought as well. HaKadosh Baruch Hu clearly knew this was a possibility. HaKadosh Baruch Hu clearly understood that this was going to happen. And yet he still gave us the Torah. He still gave us the laws of Shabbos. He still continued to shepherd us with miracles through the Midbar. It teaches us that as depressing as it might be, it's also reality. And a reality that we can look to and say, hey, we may not be doing so bad either. We strive to keep a Shabbos. We have this idea that if the whole Jewish people kept one Shabbos, that the Geula would come, the Mashiach would come. It's a beautiful thought. It's a goal we should aspire to. We should always try to raise ourselves up and push ourselves harder. But we also shouldn't be too hard on ourselves if we mess up. Jewish people messed up the very second Shabbos of their existence. They couldn't do it. With God in their face, they couldn't do it. So if we can't do it either as a nation, then we shouldn't necessarily become despondent about it, depressed about it. It's part of the reality of the nature of human beings. We continue to strive to do better, but we can't be disappointed in ourselves if we don't fully succeed at that endeavor. There is no such thing as perfection. For an entire nation to keep a Shabbos would be almost an impossible task. And so as much as it's depressing, perhaps we can derive some inspiration from this Rashi and from the story of the Makoshesh to continue pushing ourselves harder and growing at the very same time. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great